There's a statistic that haunts a lot of business owners I work with. 7 out of 10 families lose their wealth by the second generation, and 9 out of 10 lose it by the third. And here's what most people think the problem is. Of course, it has to be taxes or bad investments or poor legal structure, but that's not the problem. The real issue, it's simpler yet harder. Most families don't know how to talk about wealth. They don't know how to prepare the next generation, and that silence costs them more than any tax ever will. If you've built something meaningful, if you've accumulated wealth as a business owner, a family leader, or steward of resources, this conversation is critical. It matters because preparation is the difference between a legacy that thrives and one that unravels. Let me tell you what I see happen in families over and over. You've worked hard, you've been intentional, you've built something that took decades of focus and sacrifice. You have resources now that most people will never have, and your natural instinct, you want to protect it. You want to protect your kids from it. So you don't say anything. Maybe you tell yourself, they're not old enough yet, or I don't want them to feel entitled, or I want them to make it on their own the way I did. These are all reasonable thoughts. They sound protective, but here's what research and years of watching families tell us says. Silence isn't protection, it's the opposite. When parents avoid the conversation about wealth, they inadvertently create something they were trying to prevent. Entitlement grows in the gaps. Anxiety shows up when kids suddenly inherit money they were never prepared to manage. And families fracture because no one ever aligned on what the money actually means. One study found that 60% of families who lost their wealth cited one reason: a lack of communication and trust. Not bad markets, not unfortunate circumstances, communication and trust. There's something else happening too, something most parents don't realize. When you hide family wealth, you're not just hiding numbers, you're hiding a part of your identity, your values, and your life's work. Your children sense that, they feel the discomfort, and sometimes they start to wonder, what's wrong with having this? Why won't they talk about it? A psychologist named Paul Hochmeyer studied this. He found that children who learn about their family's wealth late in life, usually around age 25 or later, often experience something he called a fractured sense of identity. They suddenly feel like they don't know who they are. Everything shifts. So what about the ones who did better? The kids who actually learned gradually, who had context, who understood not just the what of their family's wealth, but the why. Here's what I want you to understand about entitlement. It's not caused by wealth itself. Entitlement is caused by a lack of context. It happens when kids grow up with access to resources but no understanding of responsibility. It happens when money appears without the story, without knowing how it was built, what values it represents, what it's actually for. But stewardship, that's different. Stewardship is teachable, and the families that get this right, the ones whose wealth actually survive generations, whose kids become thoughtful managers of resources instead of entitled consumers, you see, they teach stewardship early and intentionally. What does that look like? So let me give you some patterns I've noticed over the years. You start young, you start small, and you start with values. I'm not talking about handing a 10-year-old a stock portfolio. I'm talking about giving them small responsibilities, an allowance they manage, a chance to make a choice about spending versus saving. Later, maybe, they will help decide where the family gives philanthropically. You're not giving them control, you're giving them practice. Consider a family with an 8-figure net worth who invited their children into the decision-making process around generosity every year. The parents didn't choose the cause, the kids did. They researched organizations, discussed the impact, and voted together as families. And many of our clients practice this all the time. And what happens is by the time those children become adults, generosity wasn't something their parents instructed them to do. It was embedded in how they understood money, responsibility, and impact. So have the why conversation before you have the how much conversation. So most families get this backward. They start by talking about numbers, what they're worth, what they'll inherit, what the tax implications are. That's kind of premature. And what it does, it creates anxiety. Instead, start here, asking these questions. Why did we build this? What does this wealth actually mean to us? And what do we hope it allows our family to do? So talk about your values, talk about what you struggled with, talk about what you're proud of, and create context. Your children need to understand that wealth isn't just numbers on a statement, it's a reflection of choices, of priorities, of stewardship. Age matters, timing matters. I wouldn't advise putting a 21-year-old in a detailed family wealth meeting. They're still finding out themselves. But a 40-year-old, someone who's built their own career, raised their own children, and thought about their own financial future, they're ready. They need that information. Different life stages require different conversation. A teenager might learn about saving and delayed gratification. A young adult, on the other hand, might understand debt and investment. But your successful child in their 40s or 50s, they're ready for the full estate plan. They want to know the philosophy behind it and their role in the future of your family's wealth. So here's what surprised me early in this work. When families actually have these conversations, it strengthens relationships. Parents see their adult children with new respect. Kids understand the incredible effort and intention that built their foundation. Siblings realize they're aligned on things they thought they disagreed about. So wealth, it turns out, doesn't have to divide families. Silence does. If you're going to do this well, you need a framework, something that organizes the conversation. So let me give you one that works. So step one, you need to clarify your family values. Before you talk to anyone, you need to answer this for yourself. What do we value? Not generally, specifically. Is it education? Is it adventure? Is it generosity or hard work, creating opportunities, leaving something beautiful behind? Some families write a family mission statement. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be as simple as having a conversation and writing down the core themes that keeps coming up. So why does this matter? Because every decision you make about wealth, how much to give, when to transfer assets, what conditions to put on it, should reflect these values. And your kids need to see that alignment. They need to trust that you're not randomly deciding what's happening to your wealth. You're making choices based on something solid. Step two, communicate in stages. So this isn't a single conversation. It's a series of conversations over a period of time. So early stage, your kids are teenagers or in their 20s, you're teaching financial literacy. You're letting them manage small amounts of money. You're modeling with what it looks like to make decisions about spending and giving. You're showing them teamwork, effort, and earning. So middle stage, your kids are in their 30s and 40s, you start revealing more. You talk about your estate plan, not the detailed numbers necessarily, but the thinking behind it. Why did you make certain choices? What you hope the wealth accomplishes, and you give them context. And then later stage, as you get closer to the transfer or as they get older, you involve them in conversations about the philosophy and the structure. So what role will they play? How do they want to steward this? And what's their vision? So step three, have a facilitator. See, I know this might sound like you should do this alone with your family, but I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't. Bringing in an advisor, whether it's a wealth strategist, a family coach, or someone trained in family governance and communication, changes the dynamic. Suddenly, it's not just the parents imposing their vision, it's a guided conversation. Your adult children can ask hard questions without feeling like they're challenging you. You can hear their concerns without it turning into conflict. Some of the best family meetings I've ever seen happen because someone neutral was in the room, keeping things focused, asking good questions, and creating an environment for safety. Step four, address the hard stuff directly. If you have a family business and only one child wants to be involved, talk about it. How will the others be treated fairly? If you have unequal relationships with your children, maybe one has struggled and needs more support, address it. How does that affect your thinking about transfers? If there are blended family complications, bring them to light, not in a way that damages relationship, but in a way that prevents resentment from festering. Most families avoid these conversations because they're uncomfortable, but avoidance doesn't make things better, it makes things worse. I've worked with families at every wealth level, and the ones whose legacies actually thrive across generations have some things in common. First, they start early, not with their young kids, but with their mindset. They decide early on that preparing the next generation is part of their responsibility as a steward. Secondly, they're willing to be vulnerable. They talk about what's hard, how they made mistakes, what they've learned, and they don't present wealth as something that's just happened. They present presented as a result of choices, work, and sometimes just the blessings of God. And they want their kids to understand all of it. Third, they connect wealth to purpose. Wealth isn't the goal. Wealth is a tool. It might fund education or create freedom or allow generosity or preserve something beautiful, but there's a reason for it. And finally, they let their kids practice. They give them real responsibility with their oversight, of course, and then maybe it's managing an investment account. Maybe it's leading a family philanthropic initiative. Maybe it's being a part of a board discussion around family assets. They're not handing everything over immediately. They're building competence and judgment over time. This is how 70% becomes 100%, or at least a much higher percentage than where you start. I want to name something that's underneath all of this. Most wealthy people I work with feel the weight of responsibility. They know what they've built matters. They know what they're leaving behind will shape their children's lives, their family's direction, and maybe even their community. But sometimes that weight can paralyze you. You don't want to mess up, so you don't do anything. You avoid the conversation. You hope it works out. But here's what I've seen. Preparation isn't about perfect control. It's about love expressed through clarity. Providing clarity is love. So when you take the time to have these conversations, you're saying something profound to your children. You're saying, I trust you. I think you're capable of handling this. I want you to understand what I value so you can make choices that honor that even after I'm gone. That's not burdensome. That's actually freeing. Your children get to build their identities around something other than money, around values, purpose, and stewardship. And you get to see during your lifetime whether your legacy is going to work the way you hope. That's a gift to both sides. So if you're a business owner or family leader thinking about the future, this matters. Most families don't lose wealth because of bad intentions. They lose it because no one slows down to ask the right questions. That's why we created at Kingdom ROI the Great Wealth Heist Assessment. It's a simple way to uncover where wealth values and legacy may be leaking and where alignment needs to happen before it's too late. You can take the assessment now at kingdomroi.org. And if it raises questions, we can explore them together in a free 30-minute discovery call. So your legacy is too important to leave to chance.